RestOfWorld.org. RestOfWorld.org. The booming business of AI war rooms during India's elections. 10-12 minutes. Devyendra Singh Jadhav has a catalogue of videos, audio, and images on his computer that he promptly presents each time someone asks him about his work. In one of the videos, an Indian politician can be seen talking in multiple Indian languages about the various projects undertaken by his government. In an audio recording, a political party representative can be heard calling a voter to inquire about the problems they face in their locality and seeking suggestions to address them. Some of these visuals and audio clips are so realistic that a layperson would never guess they, along with the other content in Jadhav's catalog, have been created using artificial intelligence. Jadhav is the founder of Polymath Solution, a synthetic media company that started creating AI content for politicians in November last year. In just 6 months, the 9-member company run out of an office in the small western Indian town of Pushkar has worked on election campaigns for several major political parties, including the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, and the leading opposition party Indian National Congress. The 9-person team at Polymath Solution expects to generate $241,000 in revenue during India's 6-week election period. With his content catalogue, Jadhav has secured half a dozen political campaigning deals. The company expects to generate $241,000 in revenue during the 6-week-long elections. It's not a tough target. AI content makers like Polymath are sought after by national and regional politicians in India amid what is being touted as the biggest election in the world. 4 AI content agencies told Rest of World they are seeing more demand than they can manage, with political parties in the country projected to spend over $50 million on AI-generated campaign material this year. Even as they look to maximize their earnings, however, the AI content companies are filtering out unethical requests for fake content that could propagate misinformation. "I can't work with 10 parties parallelly, I don't have the bandwidth for that," Senthil Nayagam, founder of AI media tech firm Muanium, based in the southern state of Tamil Nadu, told Rest.
I think I'm on fairly strong ground when I say that we haven't yet in Computerphile done recursion. This can get extremely hard. It is difficult to get your head around recursion sometimes. In one way, you can take a very mathematical view about it, just close your eyes. And if you're a pure mathematician who thinks, as we computer scientists would say, exclusively top-down about things, you can say, oh, it's just a formal definition, you know. Here's an example of something you can do recursively. Factorial of n is equal to n times factorial of n minus 1. And if you're used to mathematical thinking, well, that's absolutely all right. Of course, they will then go on, thank heavens, and say, but you've got to stop that. You're just going round and round, chasing your own tail. Because what about factorial n minus 1 then? Well, factorial n minus 1 is the same as n minus 1 times factorial n minus 2. And the mathematician will say, oh yes, all you're doing is relabeling the n's, you know, what was n now becomes n minus 1, and so on. And yes, that's quite right. But at the bottom of all of this, you've got to have a way of dropping out and terminating this endless succession of things defined in terms of themselves. Your way out of all this is that when you hit factorial 1, that is defined to be 1. So let's take an actual real example of this, and one which we will later develop with a program. What we're saying, I'll abbreviate it now as fact rather than factorial. Factorial for, from this definition, is 4 times whatever factorial of 4 minus 1, 3 is. But factorial 3 is 3 times whatever factorial 2 is. Factorial 2 is 2 times whatever factorial 1 is. but factorial 1 is 1. So there we are then. Factorial 4 is 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 is 24. Factorial, if you wanted to work them out on a computer, you can do it one of two ways. You can do it recursively, and this really, as we will see in its implementation, will need a stack. Oh yes, it will. Or you can do it iteratively. What does it mean to do it recursively? I will look at it very briefly here, but then I will do this for you on the stack. So here's our recursive definition of factorial. In fact, I've put in a comment here saying this is the recursive version. What I'm saying here is, there again, those of you familiar with any of the C-like languages, you know, Java, C++, whatever, find this very familiar. The incoming parameter, or argument as it's sometimes called, is labelled n. The name of the function is factorial, and the answer delivered back by factorial will be an integer answer. So every time you call it, it expects an incoming parameter, or argument as it's sometimes called, and it will deliver you back an answer that's also another integer. Factorial is only defined for integers, not for real numbers, not for any other sort of thing, only for integers, and only for positive integers. It won't even work for negative ones. Okay, now this is almost like writing mathematics. It's almost like writing this definition I had up here, look. You say, if the incoming argument is 1, then my answer is 1. The factorial of 1 is 1. So I return to the outside world that wants to know, I return the answer 1. Factorial 1 is 1. Otherwise, I return back to the outside world that wants to know. I say the factorial of anything else is n times the factorial of the number 1 less than it. What the secret is here is that factorial of the next number below, you feed in as the so-called actual parameter the thing that is 1 less than the n you've got at the moment. So if you come with 4, I return back 4 times factorial 3. That's n minus 1. If n is 4, that's factorial 3. Oh gosh. What this means is I can't return the answer until I've worked out what factorial 3 is. So I dive back into this same piece of code, only this time it's still calling it n, but n has now changed into 3. So the first thing you have to get happy about is there isn't just one n. There's lots of them. They're all called n, but they're all different, and they all have to be managed and kept separate. That's the first thing. There is not just one n. Recursion wouldn't work if there were. And that way of keeping them separate just naturally falls out. No prizes for guessing. It's a stack. You need a stack to do this properly. Here's my main program. Here's its environment. Here's its data. What I'm going to do from here, the main program, is to say, I want factorial 4. In order for it to work correctly and have its own local variables, which of course includes all of these different instances of n, in this case, you put on what's called another stack frame, another whole area of the stack. And you say, which of course includes all of these different instances of n, in this case, you put on what's called another stack frame, another whole area of the stack. And you say, that one is going to deliver back the answer to factorial 4. But factorial 4 then says, can't work the answer out until I know what factorial 3 is. So remember, this smaller white one is going to work out factorial 3. It also does the usual trick. Oh, I don't know what factorial 3 is. It's 3 times factorial 2. So I've got to know what factorial 2 is. So here is the frame on the stack that will work out factorial 2. Finally, with a great sense of relief, factorial 2 says, all I know is that I'm 2 times factorial 1. There's factorial 1. At last. Factorial 1 says, I know what I am the answer 1. The factorial 2 frame is waiting there on what you might call a pending multiply. It's saying, I am 2 times whatever factorial 1 is. Factorial 1 says, here you go, into the pending multiply, the answer's 1. And then the same thing happens. Oh, so the answer for factorial 2 is 2. Where does that need to be delivered back to? It needs to be delivered back into the frame below, which is positively gasping because it wants to do 3 times whatever factorial 2 is. It's 3 times 2. Now, where is it that's waiting for that? 3 times 2 is 6. So somewhere down here, there's a pending multiply in this frame saying that factorial 4 is 4 times whatever factorial 3 was, but we just found out that factorial 3 ends up cascading down delivering 6. 4 times 6 is 24. Final pending multiply was done, and it gets delivered back into the main program, and in the main program that I've got here, and we'll put this out, of course, with a web link to it, all I do with the value when I get it back is I just print it out and say the answer to factorial 4 is 24. That's back in the main programs area at the bottom of the stack. What you have to remember is that in these pending multipliers that we had, each one of them is holding on to a different value of n as the left-hand operand in its pending multiplier. This is saying 4 times something, the one above it said 3 times... something, 2 times something, and so on. And the answer's cascaded back down and dropped out at the bottom correctly.
We'd like to thank Audible.com for sponsoring.
Given to non-negative integers a and b, find GCD of a and b. GCD of integers m and n is defined as the greatest integer g such that g is a divisor of both m and n. Both a and b fit in
तुम्हारा नहीं बाकी से करता तो नहीं कहीं कौन मुझे
दिन हक्के करा दे मका तो क्या
करे दो होगा
हवा आउ ना चले तारे बैंक में मैसेज मोकलो बैंक में ना 2 लाख रुपया डेबिट है तो ता पप्पा ने पूछी 2 लाख ની ક્રેડિટ આવ્યો
અને મારો ઓટો તો ચાલો બેટા બેટા ભાઈ
ट्रांजेक्शन सक्सेसफुल बताओ तारा में तो जो
ना कर दो चेक करना कितने होते मैं बंद कर दिया अभी मेरा मोबाइल चेक करती हो पर कितनी टेंशन को नुकसान को पड़ेगा हां
ये बड़ा अच्छा था
हां कम करता करता अब ध्यान रखो पड़ो मगे दो
integer n is defined as the greatest integer since the g is divisor of both n and આવશે વગા એનામાં નીકળી એટલે સક્સેસફુલ એનામ ઓવે yes GCD तो कदाच सर्वोदय आहे कदाच. For now, is 24 is not equal to 0 then B module A. B module A. 16
ના જોવાનું તો ખરું બેટા, જોવાનું જોવાનું હો બેટા, લાઈનમાં જોવું તો પડે બધું. પેલું થઈ ગયું તાર કાગળિયાનું કોમ. હા તમે ધ્રુવી કે શાંતિથી કાંઈ થાય અને પેલું કરતી નહીં કે વિચાર એ દારૂ છે થાય હજી તો શાંતિ રાખીને મગજ નથી.
A carry 0%, A will only be 0 in only one condition, if B is divisible by A, right? Right? B 0 at the time, whatever the A is, that A will get. Yeah, we are returning the same. This is of B, that is 24 more 16. 24. That is 0, right? And 8. Simple. Let's try it. Let's try the same solution but without recursion and with this. While A not equal 0, we want the loop first. A will be equal to B module A and B will be equal to
I'm Gail Locke McDowell, author of Cracking Coding Interview. Today we're going to talk about memoization and dynamic programming. This is a super important topic. It's challenging a bit at first, but once you get the hang of it, it gets a lot easier. Fibonacci is pretty much the classic recursive example. Fib of n is the sum of fib of n minus 1 plus fib of n minus 2. And then we need some starting conditions like fib of 0 is 0 and fib of 1 is 1. And we can very easily write out the first few cases here. But now let's think about the code. So translating this into code, very straightforward as well. But there's a problem when we
dynamic programming, what we need is it is much more faster. That is 69,425. That is perfect. This is the power of dynamic programming, right?
We think about the runtime here. So if we call this for say fib of 6, fib of 6 will call fib of 5 to 4, 5 will call 4 and 3, 4 will call 3 and 2, etc., etc., etc. Then we finish a single branch and we still need to do all the other branches. So that's going to get very, very inefficient. Specifically, if we imagine calling this for say fib of n, we're going to call fib of n, and that's going to call n minus fib of n minus 1, fib of n minus 2, fib of n minus 3, dot, 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 all the way down roughly n levels. So we'll have n levels in our tree. The first level will have 1 node. The second level will have 2 nodes. Each node has 2 children, so we'll have 4 nodes on the next level, then 8, and so on and so on. So if you take 1, you double it n times, because we have double the number of nodes at every single level, we're going to wind up with roughly 2 to the n nodes in the tree. So this gives us a runtime of O of 2 to the n. And if you remember, I was able to compute this by hand fairly quickly. And so there's a bit of a mismatch here. Why is this algorithm so inefficient? And the reason is that we keep doing things repeatedly. We compute fib of 4 twice, here and here. Fib of 3.
Okay, so we can also improve this by saving this scene in any particular local memory. Let's say if we have calculated for 500 numbers, right? So yeah, so these all numbers we save it in a file, correct? This whole part. Of 256. It will not take that much time. I think it has a feed. Yep, because it already has all of 256 in same already, right?
3 gets computed 3 times, here, here, and here. Fib of 2 gets computed 5 times, here, 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 and here. Now, obviously, these values haven't changed. Fib of 4 is always the same thing. Fib of 3 is always the same thing. So what we should be able to do is just compute these values once, and if we ever have to compute them again, just return the stored value. So we store the value each time, rather than computing it from scratch. And that's what the most basic implementation of a memoization algorithm is. So now, if we walk through what this code does, we're still going to go and compute this whole path down here.
Right.
But when we do that, we're going to build up this table. So then when we get down to computing fib of 1, well, that's a base case. Fib of 2, hey, already been computed, we just return that value. Fib of 3, already computed. Fib of 4, already computed. So although we still recurse just as deeply, all our other work has been done by that point, and we're just returning stored values. And now we get a linear runtime instead of exponential, which is, of course, an enormous improvement. So now let's talk about space complexity. Space complexity comes from any memory you use, and that includes, yes, things like creating arrays and stuff like that, but it also includes the call stack. So let's think about the space complexity of the non-memoized solution. A lot of times people will describe.
But I think space complexity is not that relevant at this time, because computer space are very cheap nowadays, right? But the time is constant. Like, we cannot buy time, we can buy extra space. So we can buy more space at cheap cost. I'm not sure if you are on the same wavelength as me. I think yeah.
This as O of 2 to the n, and that's actually a mistake. People are thinking, well, gee, all O of 2 to the n things are all in the call stack, so we need all of that. Yes, but they're not all on the call stack at the same time. One way to think about space complexity is, if I were to give you a chunk of memory to run your program, how big would that chunk of memory have to be? Though all O of 2 to the n things wind up on the call stack over all time, they're not all sitting there at the same time. The biggest your call stack ever gets, the most memory you have in use at any one point in time, is O of n. There's only O of n things that wind up on the call stack at any one given time. So the space complexity of the non-memoized solution is O of n. The memoized solution also has a space complexity of O of n, because we need O of n memory for the call stack still, and we need another O of n memory for the memo table. But O of n plus O of n is still O of n. So both of these have a space complexity of O of n. Now let's try this out on a new problem. Suppose you're given an n by n grid, and you can only move down or to the right. And certain cells are blocked off in this grid. The question is, how many paths are there from the top left to the bottom right? As you might guess, we want to approach this recursively. So let's break this down into smaller problems. The overall problem is, how many paths are there from the top left to the bottom right? Well, let's think about this green guy in the top left corner. The first decision he needs to make is, well, am I going to go down or to the right? Those are my only options. So let's picture each of those options. There are only those two ways of going. So the number of paths from the start to the end is the number of paths from position A to the end, plus the number of paths from position B to the end. So now we've broken down our problem into other subproblems. So now what happens? Well, person A has to go either down or to the right again. Same with position B. So now the number of paths from A to the end can be broken down into C and D. It's the number of paths from C to the end plus the number of paths from D to the end. Same thing with B. It's the number of paths from B to the end is the number of paths from C to the end plus the number of paths from E to the end. This recursion. So now what happens? Now let's try this out on a new problem. Suppose you're given an n by n grid and you can only move down or to the right. And certain cells are blocked off in this grid. The question is, how many paths are there from the top left to the bottom right? As you might guess, we want to approach this recursively. So let's break this down into smaller problems. The overall problem is, how many paths are there from the top left to the bottom right? Well, let's think about this green guy in the top left corner. The first decision he needs to make is, well, am I going to go down or to the right? Those are my only options. So let's picture each of those options. There are only those two ways of going. So the number of paths from the start to the end is the number of paths from position A to the end, plus the number of paths from position B to the end. So now we've broken down our problem into other subproblems. So now what happens? Well, person A has to go either down or to the right again. Same with position B. So now the number of paths from A to the end can be broken down into C and D. It's the number of paths from C to the end plus the number of paths from D to the end. Same thing with B. It's the number of paths from B to the end is the number of paths from C to the end plus the number of paths from E to the end. This recursion stops when we have a definitive answer, and that comes when we're actually at the end. The number of paths from the end to the end is just one. You stand exactly where you are. So that forms our recursion base cases. Translating this into code is relatively straightforward. We just traverse down and to the right, obviously making sure we check that we're not out of bounds or in a blocked off square. But then we just sum up the number of ways of going down plus the number of ways of going to the right. And when we get down to the actual end, we
not valid, yeah, not valid, then we can zero. Is at hand, then we can return row plus 1,
return 1. This is a pretty straightforward implementation of that algorithm. Valid square does both the boundary checking as well as making sure we're not in a blocked off square. If we are, then we return 0 because there's no paths. If we're at the end, return 1 because there's just the one path, you stay right there. Otherwise, the number of paths from here to the end is the number of paths going down to the end and plus the number of paths going right to the end. One little tip, by the way, whenever I do a matrix problem, I like to use row and column for my variable names rather than x and y. And the reason is that the x-coordinate actually translates to columns, and the y-coordinate translates to the rows. But people tend to instinctively write grid of x comma y, and that's backwards. It should be grid of y comma x. It just leads to a lot of confusion, so take it from me, don't use x and y when you're dealing with matrices, use rows and columns instead. Well, one thing we might notice is that in the example above, we compute the number of paths from C to the end twice. And that's unnecessary. What we should be doing is saying, hey, if I've already computed something, just return that stored value. So every single thing I compute, I want to just store that value and return it if I ever ask for it again. And that's a memoization approach. Now, instead, we just compute it once, and then if we ever need that value again, just return that stored value. And that's all we have to do here. The runtime now is O of n squared because we have n squared possible cells that we have to compute this for. But and each time we compute it, it's constant time given that we have other work already done. So that gives us a runtime of O of n squared. So if we want to, we can flip this around and do more of a traditional dynamic programming approach. So let's take a look at how this would work. If we think about what the recursive approach does, the very first concrete values it gets, other than the base cases, are these two cells. And so that gives us two concrete answers. Now where can we go from here? Well, the next thing, if we take that recursion one step up, the next thing it does is it might be filling in one of these three cells. So let's start with this one here. Well, we know the answer to that cell, and 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 that cell. All of these cells have just one path from their cell to the end, which is this path here. Now, what about this cell here? Well, if there's one path going down, one path going to the right, the actual answer is their sum. So there's two paths there. Now here, again, one path there. Now, when we go to this cell, there are two paths going down or to the right. So the sum is going to be these two, just the sum of those two cells. And this one here, well, we can go down or we can go to the right. There's two paths if we go to the right, one path if we go down. So the actual result for the number of paths from this cell to the end is result for the number of paths from this cell to the end is 3 paths. And we can double check that if we want. One path is going down and then all the way over. Another path is going to the right, down, and then all the way over. Or to the right again, down, and all the way over. So sure enough, yes, there are 3 paths. And we can do this exact approach going through the entire grid, starting from the bottom left, moving to the left, starting from the bottom right, moving all the way to the left, up 1 row, all the way to the left, up 1 row, all the way to the left, filling in these values as we go. So we're going to get a 1, actually a 0 here, because there's actually no paths from this cell down to the right. And here there'll be 3, because we can only go down. Here, 3 again, we can only go to the right. 4, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then 3 here, 7 here, 1, 2, 1, 2. And we can go through and fill in the entire cell, the entire matrix this way. Our runtime is still O of n squared, and so is our space complexity. But we've reduced the actual amount of memory used slightly because we no longer have to use a call stack. So these are a couple different ways of approaching problems. You can tackle things recursively. That's often a pretty good way to get your handle on the problem in the first place. Then you might implement a memoization approach and just throw...
Is repeating the things for which you already have answered. Repeating a program will be solved. That's what kind of program you have. It always remember answers to the sub-problems you have already solved. Let us say that we have a machine, and to determine its state at time t, we have certain quantities called state variables. There will be certain times when we have to make a decision which affects the state of the system, which may or may not be known to us in advance. These decisions or changes are equivalent to transformations of state variables. The result of the previous decision help us in choosing the future ones. Some famous dynamic programming algorithms are Unix diff. What is this? Looking the utility diff is a data comparison to that the computation displays the differences between the contents of files. Okay, diff. Dialing forward or Twitter. Was that equal to basically recursion plus using common sense. What it means is that recursion allows you to express the value of a function in terms of other value of that function, where the common sense tell you that if you implement your function in a way that the recursive calls are done in advance and stored for easy access, it will make your program faster. And this is what we call memorization. Memorizing the result of some specific states, which can then be later accessed to solve the subproblems. Yeah, factorial we have already seen. Optimization problems. Majority of dynamic programming problems can be categorized into 2 types: optimization and combinatorial. The optimization problem expects you to select a feasible solution so that the value of the required function is minimized or maximized. Combinatorial problem expects you to figure out the number of ways to do something or the probability of some event happening. Every dynamic programming problem has a schema to be followed so that the problem can be broken down into optimal subproblems. Recursively define the value of the solution by expressing it in terms of optimal solutions for smaller subproblems. compute the value of the optimal solution in bottom-up fashion. Construct an optimal solution from the computed information, bottom-up and top-down. I am going to learn when I will start practicing, then I will start taking part in contests, then I will practicing more and try to improve after working hard like not a great idea, but I hope my point across. In top down, you start building the big solution right away by expanding explaining okay. If n equals 5, the answer would be 6. It's not a problem. Let us say that you are given a number n. You have to find the number of different ways to write it as the sum of 1, 3 and 4. Okay, number is 5 and is 5 then. This 6 method dp and dp of 0 is equal to dp1 equal to dp2. Okay, so how can we write the sum of 0 with only using this 1, 3 and 4? 0, that is impossible. With 1, 3 and 4. 1, there is only one way, that is 1. For 2, there is only one way, 1 plus 1, right? For 3, there are 2 ways, 1 plus 1 plus 1 and 3, right? For 4 to the n, what we have is dp I minus 1, I minus 3, I minus 2. The technical work takes a bottom-up approach and uses memorization to not compute results that have already been computed. DCB minus 1. Okay, sorry, my bad. That would be 4. was reading that is it like that? Is it? 0 and we have 1 and 3. 1 and 3 only. 4 we have removed. 1 or 0, that is 1. It's going to be 4. It's going to be dp of I minus 1. I minus 1 plus minus 3. 1, 2, 3, that is here. Plus 3. 3 plus 1, that is 4. And here 4 plus 2. 6. 6, 3, 9 plus 4, 13. 13, 13, 6. For the 8, that is 0, because we are indexing 0. Right, we don't need 2D array. Right. That is our answer. You are climbing a staircase. It takes n steps to reach the top. Each time you can either climb 1 or 2 steps. In how many distinct ways you can climb to the top? This is the same. Oh. Let's say three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. Okay. So if we have only one step and there is only one way, we have 2 steps, then we have two ways. Either we can go 1 and 1 or direct 2. If we have 3, there is 3 ways we can either 1 1 1, 1 2 or 2 1, right? This is for 3. For 4 it should be 5, because 1 1 1 8. It's going to be 8. 8. Let's keep that in mind. solution. लाओ जे पानी ले
મારા જો પછી જાય કામ પપ્પાને પાડી
for these are the base cases, right? For 1 it is 1, for 2 it is 2. These are our base case. For I page, let's start with 3 to the n plus 1 because n plus 1, yeah, n plus 1 dp of I would equal to dp I minus 1 plus dp I minus 2, and let's also return dp of I and sorry I and we just return then of the getter is a fragment. What is the meaning of frag? Free? Acha, free to move or make use someone, something that is what was that my question.
Grazia.co.in. Career advice. Grazia India. Atharva Pandit. 9-12 minutes. Since we all show our love differently, mastering the art of the 5 love languages can be your key to staying on the same page as your partner. Have you ever poured your heart out to your partner and they just didn't get it? Do you feel continuously underappreciated even though you are aware that your significant other cares about you? The reason could be that you and your partner would have different love languages. Have you ever poured your heart out to your partner and they just didn't get it? Do you feel continuously underappreciated even though you are aware that your significant other cares about you? The reason could be that you and your partner would have different love languages.
What the fuck? Any other solve you saw in the basement. He's definitely a beast. What all sense? Soaking the blood and guts of your village students are him as an empress. What the fuck? Vagabond.
Do you know who we are?
Yes. If I'm right, I applied to you twice before. You rejected me twice too.
Circumstances change. We want to offer you the opportunity to do something important with your life.
Your brother.
That is fine. अपडेट आएगा. Datasets as an algorithm are actually used.
Alright. Hey, my name is Forrest, welcome back. So lately I've talked about some algorithms, and I've talked about some data structures. I've shown what they look like, how the code behind them works, why it's important to choose right ones, and mentioned how they're used. But it's been brought to my attention that I haven't shown how they're used in real-world applications. Take a social media app, for example. Every single one has a feed of whatever content that social media application, that platform provides. In this instance, it's a bunch of posts that are used as examples because I'm still working on this. But are these posts stored in a data structure? Kind of, not really, but kind of. We have to work our way to it. As you can see, the posts are actually stored in an array of objects, or at least when they're being used. See, they're stored actually in the database. In this instance, it's a PostgreSQL database with all of the posts being stored in a table. And this table has all of the information. Each row is a single post and it has the unique ID created updated it, the user ID for who created it, the title, content, URL, image, you get the idea. But then we need to use this. So the way we use it is that we call to our database and we fetch those posts from our database and we put them in descending order so the most recent is up top. And then once we do that, we return the data for whenever this function is being called, like right here. So we are calling our fetch posts and storing all of that data. Remember what it's returning into our array of objects. Just like you can have an array of strings where each value is a string or an integer, each one here is an object, so each object has all of that post data that you need. And then we map through it just to make sure that our types are all consistent and things of that nature. And then what we're doing here is returning it by passing it through posts in the post feed. As you can see right here, post is the parameter that's being passed into post feed. And then we are using it throughout our code and however we see fit. With this being that front end code that you see here, so within each post, we need to identify the user and that user's username and profile, the title, the content, the upvotes, and that's what we do down here as well. We get the user post image, we get the username, we get when it's created at, that's what this data is here, the post title, as you can see, so on and so forth. So that's how an array would be used in an instance like this. But what about an algorithm? So as you can see here, we have home, that's where we're at right now, and you can notice that we have these being upvoted 1, 1, 1, and then there's a 0 down here, and then there's a 1 right here. If we go to most upvoted, you can now see that all of those that are actually upvoted by me, the sole user, are at the top because it's ordered from the most upvoted down. But how do we do that? It's actually very, very simple. So what we do is we do the same thing as before. We fetch the post. So remember, we're using this, we're calling to our database and bringing in all of that data, storing it in an array of objects, but then we are sorting that array of objects based on vote count, which is one of the values within the object, as you can see right here. And this right here is a sorting algorithm. Now in JavaScript, it depends on what engine you're using. So if you're using Chrome or Node.js, that uses the V8 engine, so that uses TimSort, which is a hybrid sorting algorithm.
I need to do 130 tight. Shoot. Shoot. Try and let's see. Shoot. बैठ जा शिट हाँ बघा गया कौन बोले करा हाँ संस्कृत let's learn Sanskrit.
What if I told you Sanskrit grammar is the easiest to understand? You might laugh it off, but it's true. It has only 2 types of words with 3 changes each. You might already know that Sanskrit language has hundreds of root sounds, thousands of grammatical rules, and millions of possible words. On top of it, they all seem to be arranged into dreadful looking tables, the stuff of nightmares for any Sanskrit student. But what if I told you that all of this has an extremely simple and an elegant source of origin and can be understood within the next few minutes? The Sanskrit channel is an effort to explore a vast variety of topics from original Sanskrit literature. If you wish to support this effort, consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon or make a one-time contribution through these options. Your support will help us improve the quality, length, and number of topics covered in our videos. Do check out all the links in the description below. Any Sanskrit word can be seen as a combination of 3 parts. There is a root sound or the dhatu, which holds the essence or meaning of the word. There is a prefix called upasarga, which modifies the meaning of the root sound. And there is a suffix. You might have heard such claims as Sanskrit is not a made-up language. It is the language of the existence. It has not been created as a means of expression and communication like other languages. It is rather an outcome of refined human experience of the nature of existence. These might seem like far-fetched claims of a fanatic, but one doesn't necessarily need to delve into the depths of Sanskrit or even know the basics of the language to realize the truth behind these claims. A simple look at the Sanskrit alphabet is enough for one to verify the truth behind these claims for oneself. Unlike other languages, where the alphabet is set because of writing conventions and is mugged up to a tune, the basic sounds of Sanskrit are a natural outcome of human physiology. The arrangement of these sounds are not arbitrary, they are a natural consequence of the origin of sound itself. In this video, let's look at the first set of Sanskrit sounds, how they are formed, why they are arranged the way they are arranged, and how deep their association is with the human physiology and beyond. The Sanskrit channel is an effort to explore a vast variety of topics from original Sanskrit literature. If you wish to support this effort, consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon or make a one-time contribution through these options. Your support will help us create more of these videos more frequently on more number of topics. Do check out all the links in the description below. There are 2 kinds of letters in the Sanskrit alphabet based on how the sound is produced. The letters that correspond to sounds which are native sva to the vocal cavity are called as swaras. The letters which correspond to sounds that can only be produced by a special effort of the organs in the vocal cavity are called as vyanjanas. We'll look at vyanjanas in a different video, but in this video, let's take a deeper look at swaras. There are 16 swaras in Sanskrit language. If you are aware of the either forms of the Indian classical music systems, you might already know that a musical note is also called by the same name, swara. This is because the word swa, ra means a self-established sound. In music, it denotes the 7 notes, and in language, it denotes the 16 vowels. Let us now look at how to pronounce each swara individually. I'll pronounce each one and give a pause, during which you can repeat it after me. I'll also display the Devanagari symbol for each swara here. You can use this to learn how to write each symbol. As we do this exercise, try and focus on the vocal formation and see if you can notice a pattern. Let's start. The first swara is A. We open the mouth naturally, jaws apart, and without any constriction anywhere in the mouth, let out a primal sound A. Next, bring the jaws closer together and with a slight constriction at the back of the mouth, say E. Now, with the same jaw position, constrict the lips and utter the sound oo. Try it again. Oo. Next, constrict the vocal cavity with the help of your tongue. Bring it close to the roof of the mouth, palate, but make sure you don't hit it against the roof of the mouth. This is the sound R. This is not Ra, this is R. Make the same constriction slightly ahead in the mouth with the tongue just behind the upper row of teeth. This sound is R. Try it again. R. I hope you were able to get all these 5 sounds. Each of these have 2 variants, Hrasva, which means short, and Dirgha, which means long. I'll utter these letters in an order, one after the other. Try repeating them after me. A, I, U, R, R. This completes the first 10 letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. The next 6 letters are
RCB. Am I also? RR. Okay. Bye. Where is Chennai? Yeah, Chennai. anxiety is the key to greatness. Okay.
When we hear the word Dubai, most of us picture towering skyscrapers, immense wealth, police with Lamborghinis, 7-star hotels with the absolute cream of society inside them. Also the Palm Islands, the World Islands, the Burj Khalifa, the Burj Al Arab, futuristic symbols of incredible wealth. And so in light of all that, I'm here to make the case that Dubai, the Emirates and the Gulf countries in general are one of the worst places on the planet. Now this is a rather bold claim, I realize, but it's one that I can substantiate fully. So let's take a look at what's really behind the glitz and glamour, the true face of Dubai and the Gulf countries. To better understand what's going on in a place like Dubai, first let's talk about Romania. In the decades following World War II, Bucharest, the capital, came to face the same problem as many Eastern European capitals did at the time. As urbanization increased and huge residential areas were built out, the need arose for new, high-capacity public transportation. And so Nicolae Ceausescu, the dictator of Romania back in the day, gave out the order to construct a metro line. And so the engineers created a line proposal and presented it to him. And then Ceausescu was like, "No, I will design the route personally." And so the former shoemaker assistant, who also called himself the genius of the Carpathians, I am not making this up, sat down and redesigned the entire metro line to have it run along the river underneath. Yes, along. But Nicolae Ceausescu's wife, Elena Ceausescu, a former textile factory worker, also got her fair share of planning. Reportedly, when the planners presented the final version of the metro line to the Ceausescu couple, Elena Ceausescu reportedly asked why the metro would stop inside the inner city at Piața Romana, inquiring what kind of factories there are. The planners told her there aren't any factories, but there is the Bucharest University of Economics where there are lots of students. Hearing that, Elena Ceausescu reportedly said, "Students? They've gotten fat, they grew a belly, they should walk. No station at Romana, let them walk." And so, since Nicolae Ceausescu added nothing to that and nobody else dared to oppose his wife, the station was axed from the plans. But of course everyone outside of the dictator power couple knew that this was fucking stupid. And so the engineers, having enough foresight, decided to build the station in secret, banking on the fact that they would need to build a station there anyway due to future public pressure. And they were correct. The end result was this ridiculous and dangerously narrow station, since the engineers couldn't build a normal station hall, since they had to disguise their little secret project as regular tunnel boring. And so the moral of the story is, smooth brain dictator plus construction equals dumb shit. And boy, what a perfect segue this is to the video's actual subject, Dubai. The city of Dubai is a fucking joke. It's a tasteless parody of everything wrong with modern humanity. And so why do I say that? Let's go through it, shall we? Now, in my video about skyscrapers, I have already talked about the Burj Khalifa. It's a big dumb tower of glass and steel stuck in the middle of the desert, serving no other purpose than a petrodollar-fueled dick measuring contest. And the building even has its own poem about itself. Like seriously, how pretentious can you get?
I am the life force of collective aspirations and the aesthetic union of many cultures. I simulate dreams, stir emotions and...
What the hell is that noise? Oh no, it's the poop trucks! Yeah, did you know that the Burj Khalifa isn't connected to its sewage system? So every single day a huge line of poop trucks have to queue up next to the building and suck out all the poop. So Ammar's ambition and Dubai's shining dream included the world's tallest skyscraper but not a sewer system. And besides, I talked about this before in the skyscrapers video, there's actually not much point to building a skyscraper. Like the only situation where it might make sense is when you're physically out of space. But trust me, Dubai does not have this problem, which ties into the next suspects. Dubai's Palm Islands are the OG symbols of the city. The construction of the first one, the Palm Jumeirah, started in 2001, if you can believe that. And according to Google's satellite images, it's still not finished, it's still getting built out. And just for good measure, let's take a look at what they actually built here. I mean, these things do look nice from space, but what are they really, from up close and personal? Well, the stem is an 8-lane urban freeway, and the leaves are just individual suburban streets. Oh, and there's also a monorail in the middle. Oh, and between The Point and Nakheel Mall, there are no stations. So then, how do people living on the leaves get on this thing? Well, it's a rhetorical question, of course. Just like the real suburbs in America, this thing was built around cars. And the second palm, the Jebel Ali, will be more the same. And then there are the World Islands, of course, which are just a complex of tiny islands for the ultra-rich and their villas. And, oh my god, this looks outright post-apocalyptic, Jesus Christ. Oh, and there's a third palm under construction if the two weren't enough. Oh, and by the way, the sand they use for the palms is not desert sand. They can't use it because the grains are too big. Instead, they have to get the sand from the seafloor. And they achieve this by sucking it up with these big tanker ships. And also annihilating acres of marine life in the process. Oh, and by the way, these palm islands were built on top of natural coral reefs, which they just ended up basically burying. Oh, and according to NASA measurements, all these islands are sinking at a rate of 5 millimeters per year. And by the way, have you heard about this thing called the rising sea levels? According to the Environment Agency Abu Dhabi, under the most severe climate change scenario, nearly all of Dubai, including the Palm Islands, would be underwater. Alright, so let me get this straight. You had all the money and power in the world to create anything, and you have paid money to annihilate a coral reef to build a sinking suburb on top of it. Perhaps I treated you too harshly. And here's the kicker about these islands. That's right, I'm still not done. Why build them on the sea to begin with? I mean, you have the desert. You have all the space you will ever need. So why not just build the palms inverted into the land? You know, having the actual body of the palm not out of sand, but out of water. It would look just as impressive from space, and it wouldn't even demolish all the aquatic life. Hang on a second, they did do something like this already, just below the palm tree. And, oh no, these are American-style suburbs? Oh man. I can't believe it. They took the worst urbanism practices from the US and they implemented it one-to-one. And we actually have all the circles of urbanism hell in here. Copy-paste housing, cold cul-de-sacs, giant highways cutting through the area, no public transportation, a 12-lane arterial road, Jesus Christ. And so this will be our segue to Dubai's urbanism in general is just complete bonkers. It's kind of its own little bubble, really. A strange little rich people's dystopia in the desert. Take a look at this arrangement. Two sections of skyscrapers separated by a 20-something lane freeway, and behind it a bunch of cul-de-sac suburbs and golf courses. It's this strange mixture between Futurama and evil Los Angeles. And this just makes me feel so frustrated because all that money and all that power, they could have done so much more and so much better than this. The way I understand it, the main motive behind building all this flashy stuff was to try and increase tourism, to help the Emirates economy transition away from oil revenues, which is, you know, fair enough. But then why not build something truly unique? Something that isn't just a big dumb tower of glass and steel, or a couple dozen suburban streets on sinking sandbanks, or gigantic malls or golf courses. Imagine a city with full-on historic Arabic Golden Age architecture with modern elements. Okay, this is concept art from Diablo 3, but you get the idea. I have seen skyscrapers, malls, suburbs, urban freeways, or golf courses before. What I haven't seen is a historical or at least historicist Arab city. That would be a great way of spending all those petrol dollars, or at least a better way, I would say, and that might even attract a more quality crowd instead of the oligarchs, trust fund babies and nouveau-riche idiots. Okay, that's a bit unfair, but Dubai right now is not exactly a haven of intellectualism, so to speak. By the way, did you know that only 10% of the Emirates population is actually Emirati? The other 90% being immigrants and expats. Well, actually they're all immigrants. It's just that white people came up with this word expat, so they don't have to call themselves immigrants abroad because that word is reserved for brown people. Speaking of which... And this right here is my biggest problem with Dubai, the Emirates and the Gulf states in general. All that luxury, wealth and opulence you see all around you in Dubai rests on a mountain of human tragedies. Poor people from third world countries such as India, Pakistan and Bangladesh are lured in by work agencies promising high wages and stable employment. People take loans from friends and family so they can cover the costs of their travel and work visa, usually more than $2,000, despite Emirati law requiring the companies to pay for those. Upon arrival, workers' passports are often confiscated, essentially trapping them inside the country. Workers are forced to work up to 12-hour shifts, up to 7 days a week, for $175 per month on average. Wage arrears are common, many workers not receiving money for months on end. To quote from a Human Rights Watch report, the impact on workers whose wages are withheld for even 1 month is very serious. They immediately fall into arrears on the death day of recruiting agencies in their home countries. They incur additional interest, and they are unable to send money home for their families who depend on their income earned in the Emirates. In some cases, the non-payment of wages means that workers do not have money to buy food or basic goods and end up borrowing money just to survive. The COVID epidemic only made things worse. That and the oil price crashing left many workers jobless. Consequently, many were abandoned by their former employers. They now spend their days in half-abandoned worker camps on the outskirts of the city. Only volunteers and their food donations standing between them and starvation. A Guardian article quotes a construction worker called Hassan. He says, "Guests on and off visit and give something, but when nobody comes, we have to starve. We have nothing." All this just a few kilometers away from the 7-star hotels, the world's tallest skyscraper, the world's biggest mall, and the golf courses for rich foreigners. According to the estimates of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, between 2012 and mid-2018, more than 10 Indian workers died in Gulf countries every single day. And these are just the Indians. In addition to that, a Jezebel article goes on to say that at least 2 Indians commit suicide every single week in the Emirates. A number, they say, that is simultaneously both shocking yet unsurprising. They show photos of the accommodation the workers have to endure, unfit even for animals. A harsh contrast to Instagram's parallel universe. They call this system modern slavery, and I'm afraid they are correct. This and the previously mentioned issues, but especially this, is why I hate the Emirates and especially fucking hate Dubai. The city of Dubai is a fucking joke, one that's unusually cruel. It's a twisted parody of everything wrong with modern humanity. I'll leave you with a poem from Bertolt Brecht, written in 1935, titled Questions from a Worker, who reads, "Who built Thebes of the 7 gates? In the books you will read the names of kings. Did the kings haul up the lumps of rock? And Babylon, many times demolished, who raised it up so many times? In what houses of gold glittering Lima did its builders live? Where, the evening that the Great Wall of China was finished, did the masons go? Great Rome is full of triumphal arches. Who erected them? Over whom did the Caesars triumph? Had Byzantium, much praised in song, only palaces for its inhabitants? Even in fabled Atlantis, the night that the ocean engulfed it, the drowning still cried out for their slaves. The young Alexander conquered India. Was he alone? Caesar defeated the Gauls. Did he not even have a cook with him? Philip of Spain wept when his armada went down. Was he the only one to weep? Frederick II won the 7 Years' War. Who else won it? Every page a victory. Who cooked the feast for the victors? Every 10 years a great man. Who paid the bill? So many reports, so many questions. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry the video took such a dark turn in the end, but as I was looking up stuff for Dubai for the video, I kept encountering more and more just alarmingly fucked up information. Like, Jesus Christ. Anyway, thank you for watching once again, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and do check out my Patreon tiers, link in the description. And I'll see you next time. So in case you've been living under a rock for the past month, the Saudi government has officially announced NEOM, an ultra-high-tech region of the future, made up of Trojana, an LSD user's idea of a mountain resort, the Oxagon, the floating surveillance dystopia, and of course, the Line, the futuristic line-shaped city cutting straight through the landscape. And we're going to take a look at them now. First, Trojana, which is a mountain resort on crack, complete with a huge concrete artificial lake, some bizarre mirror cave, a portal connecting the digital and the physical, a vertical village where people are transported by balls, some ultra-luxury housing, and the world's most advanced healthcare and well-being center, to nourish both body and soul. Now, believe it or not, this is the least stupid part of NEOM, and is generally feasible, if we leave out all the bizarre shapes. But as soon as the Saudi dictator wants something more complicated than a mountain resort, things start going downhill pretty fast. Enter the Oxagon, a chimera of seaport, high-tech industry and residential areas, half of it floating on the sea. 100% renewable energy, fully automated seaport, clean, advanced manufacturing, research and innovation, buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. However,
this is a cognitive city that not only adapts to your needs, but will learn to anticipate them.
it's just a fancy way of saying you'll be under constant surveillance by the Saudi state. And I'm sorry, you are building in the open desert. You have virtually unlimited space at your disposal. Why is half of this thing floating on the sea, blocking the way to your commercial seaport? And now you also run the risk of having a cargo ship ram into your city, not to mention the damage severe weather could do. Also, are you going to invent environmentally friendly cargo ships as well? Because those are some of the worst polluting vehicles on the planet. But the Oxagon still isn't the stupidest part of this project. That title goes to The Line. It's going to be so modern and futuristic that flying pods will take you to your beheading after the Saudi religious police deems you a blasphemer for sharing an article about women's rights. And, believe it or not, its current iteration is a vastly upscaled version of the original concept, which was basically 3 levels with some buildings around the pedestrian level. But they only got more ambitious with time, so now the line is a 170 km long, 500 meter tall, 200 meter wide mirror-plated skyscraper going through the desert. So what is wrong with this project? Well, what's not wrong with it? Let's take a look. The project itself has some surprisingly neat characteristics. You're always 5 minutes away from amenities, 2 minutes away from nature, and there are no cars or any other emission sources. Also, the whole project is set to be fully powered by renewable energy. And that's great, but they're trying to accomplish all this with a 170 km long hollow skyscraper in the desert. There is a very good reason why we aren't building cities in a line shape, since you needlessly stretch everything out. So you can be 5 minutes away from amenities, but if the amenity you want is on the other end of Neom, well, now you gotta travel up to 170 kilometers to get to it. Also, the reason why they insist on a line shape is because it's supposedly more compact and prevents sprawling, which is a problem in Saudi Arabia. But sprawling only happens because of cars. Cities that weren't built or bulldozed for cars are all compact and space efficient by nature, so they could have just built a car-free city, but that's not futuristic enough, so now we have the line. In contrast, if the city was a big cube, or better yet a cylinder, to achieve the 34 square kilometer footprint, instead of cutting through the landscape, you would only need a 3.3 kilometer radius structure. I don't know if the tub would feel as futuristic, but if they're all about efficiency, that's what they should be building. Not to mention, the tub would have less sides exposed to the elements, and you don't even need to drag out utilities for 170 kilometers, leading to better efficiency by an order of magnitude. But once again, that doesn't feel futuristic enough, so we have to do the stupid version that does. And the problem with these pre-planned monstrosities is they cannot account for population growth. They are inflexible. The line is supposed to have housing for up to 9 million people. What if the population tries to exceed that? Will there be a waiting list? In a regular city, you can either densify or build new districts. With the line, you're stuck within the dimensions of your mirror-plated desert tube. So if the population tries to outgrow the 9 million mark, things will become unaffordable pretty quickly. But if the population declines, you're going to have massive abandoned sections which you have to maintain nonetheless. You can just disable or mothball them, because that would cut the line in two. Now, speaking of population, this whole futuristic space efficiency looks nice on renders, but it would basically entail living on top of each other in a confined space. The psychological effects of this would be severe, but at least this layout would make it easier to hide from the religious police. Aside from that, since we're building a city in 3D, everything also has to be accessible by low mobility groups. So we're looking at systems of elevators and escalators that take you up to 500 meters, multiplied along the entire length of 170 kilometers. To give you an idea of what this entails, the Empire State Building, which is as tall as Neom, has to operate 73 elevators to move people around. But let's be charitable and say Neom will only need 20 elevators for a given section. Let's also throw in 10 escalators for good measure. Suppose we have one of these elevator-escalator systems every 500 meters. That's 6,800 elevators and 3,400 escalators. Yeah, D-vitamin deficiency is also going to be an issue. In order to get sunlight, you either have to live on the sunny side or go all the way up to the top. Otherwise, life inside Neom would be rather depressing. You're locked inside a narrow tube full of buildings with prying eyes on you potentially from all directions at all times. If you want to catch a breather, you can always go outside though, into the open, empty desert. Or you can take Neom's transportation system, which is just as smart and well thought out as the rest of the project. The planners, I mean CGI artists' idea of transportation inside the line is a metro line, a freight rail line, and some ultra-high-speed whatever running at the bottom all along its entire length. And this is stupid for a number of reasons. First, you have to build 170 kilometers of subway and underground freight rail, so basically 340 kilometers of double-track rail tunnels in total. And then, between those, some kind of techno-bullshit rapid transit that takes you from one end to the other in 20 minutes. so the thing would have to run at least at 510 kilometers per hour, not counting stops along the way. I've heard rumors they want a Hyperloop, you know, that thing Elon Musk admitted to be a scam to try to get California high-speed rail cancelled, but here a regular maglev would also be enough. Otherwise they would have pods, because of course they would, and also air taxis, which has to be the stupidest, most dangerous idea of all. Running a helicopter in a narrow, semi-enclosed space like that within close proximity of public areas and housing. So not only will you go deaf from the noise and blind from the rotor wash creating a tornado of trash and dust, you'll also get blown down into the chasm, if the thing doesn't crash into the walls first due to some erratic turbulence. So you would be using the subway for local transportation and the maglev for long distance. And this is a problem, since we're going in a straight 170 km long line. If there's any failure at any point, your system is immediately cut in half, not to mention necessary maintenance or overhauls. That would be complete chaos. This is what happens when you have a single transit line serving millions of people. Oh, you're gonna ride the subway? Sorry, someone fell on the tracks 150 kilometers down, so now 5 million people are late from work. And if you need to get to the other end but the maglev breaks down, I hope you like traveling 200 stops on the subway for 5 hours, because that's what you're going to do. And these problems could easily be solved if the line was shaped like a regular city, not a fucking line in the desert. Speaking of... If you look at any city on a map, you'll notice one thing. It was either built next to a river or on the coast. Even cities like Medina that appear to be in the middle of nowhere are actually built on top of oases. As for the line's location, there is absolutely nothing there. It's an empty desert, meaning things like food and water would need to be shipped in from elsewhere and then taken along the entire 170 kilometer length of the line. And just how do they plan on going through that mountain range? Will they dig tunnels underneath? Will they excavate the mountain away? What if somewhere along the way the soil is unsuitable for a 500-meter skyscraper? Will the whole thing just sink into the sand then? And this whole fixation they have on space efficiency would be fair enough if they weren't trying to be space efficient out in the open desert where they have virtually limitless space to expand. Speaking of, there is a huge open area right where the line should end. If they really want to build the city of the future in the country of the medieval, they could just do it there. Well, actually, the area isn't completely empty. Neom is planned to be built on top of the Al-Huwaita tribe's territory. So the Saudi government has already started harassing, forcefully displacing and abducting them. Thus, Neom will stand on the surest foundation that is genocide. But the line and Neom as a whole in their current forms are just not happening. Here's why. On paper, the Neom project will cost $500 billion. That might sound reasonable until you consider that the price includes a mountain resort complex with a mirror cave and an artificial lake, a half-floating city seaport complex, and a 500-meter tall, 170-kilometer long skyscraper, including 340 kilometers of underground rail and 170 kilometers of maglev. For the sake of perspective, just the volume of the line is equivalent to about 6,000 Empire State Buildings, and just one Empire State Building cost $572 million in today's dollars. And the latter was a regular building, not some techno-magic hocus-pocus fever dream. Also, regular skyscrapers, as bad and pointless as they are, I have a video on that, have the advantage of being built on top of pre-existing city infrastructure. In the case of the line, you have to build out all the utilities and services from scratch, plus hundreds of kilometers of underground transit. All that is to say, Neom isn't getting built out of $500 billion. By the Saudi dictator's own construction company, mind you. And how this project would be paying for itself is anyone's guess, really. But hey, Indian and Pakistani slave labor provides a great opportunity for cost savings. And there are many more problems I could list, such as how would the line be cooled, how they would combat airborne diseases in that large semi-enclosed space, what if a maglev slams into a structural element and the whole structure just starts dominoing, what about the constant wind stress that the structure would be subject
નમૂનો આલે ને એ પ્રમાણે પેલા ફોટા કે કયા પ્રમાણે માં કરીએ
આપણે આવો
4 MB પેલું આપણે 6 MB અપલોડ નહીં થતો આ 6 MB
એ તો ફોટા ના કહેવાનું હું કરી આપું લાઈમન નું કર
એવું હોય
સાઈઝ તો રિડ્યુસ ઇન में થઈ જાય
લે તાર આપણે મોકલતા
मैडम ये तो मैडम ही जाते करिएगा 4 MB 6 MB से 4 MB
એવું ને હા એટલે તને મોકલ્યા હા હા કઈ પછી ના મેડમ ને મોકલી દો ખાલી મેસેજ મેડમ બરાબર હા
One dream ends, another begins. Fight! Where are they?
Project 2. How would water be provided for 9 million people in the desert and so on.
Night. Ah be abi.
Of course, the overarching goal of this project is to create a trade artery between Saudi and Egypt, bypassing Israel, which is fine, but they could do this very easily without all the unsustainable techno bullshit. Want to build
10
a
kills
resort?
remaining.
Just build a goddamn mountain resort. Want to build a seaport? Just build a goddamn seaport. Want to build a sustainable, walkable, emission-free city? Just build it on the coast. We know how to do it. We've been doing it for thousands of years before cars took over our streets. And this is the tragedy of dictators. They can only think in terms of megalomaniacal bullshit projects only to serve their egos and provide huge handouts for themselves and their cronies. The bigger and shinier the project, the bigger the ego and the bigger the handouts. That's the reason why smooth brain dictator plus construction project equals dumb shit. Neon is the latest, biggest, shiniest, dumbest example of that. Oh, and by the way, if I disappear after this video, please have the authorities treat it as a murder. Thanks.
5 kills remaining.
The first time I heard the word Mahakal was actually the Virat Kohli video where he goes Jai Mahakal.
Jai Mahakal, Jai Mahakal.
It taught me as a guy in Mumbai who's never heard of Mahakal, it taught me about Mahakal. What in that temple is calling these people?
Mahakal is that being which is at the last frontier of your imagination.
Wow.
And Mahakal is the highest form of Bhairava. There's no difference between Shiva and Bhairava. It is only the Maya of Shiva that makes you see these two as different.
I think that's the beauty of Sanatan Dharma in the first place. That
Absolutely. In this path, sanctified alcohol is offered to the mother.
Is that also consumed by the father?
Yeah, it becomes prasad. The most powerful Shakti that has been created are three. First is sex.
1
then
kill
Maya.
remaining.
Everything is governed by these three. A man who goes beyond these three is the same.
So there are humans around us today on this earth which are reincarnations of a being that was previously in a lower realm.
Very often. Sri Aurobindo had written in some of his writings, somebody like Stalin, he was an Asura. So the greater the evil, the greater is the amount of damage it will cause. And in fact about Hitler also. Exorcism tried on Hitler by church during that time.
After every single spiritualism based episode on TRS, one of the top comments is always bring Rajarshi Nandi back on TRS. This is the first part of a 4-part series that we've built with Rajarshi Nandi during his recent Mumbai visit. We've centered the conversation around Bhairav and Shaivism based Tantra. We go into many tangential directions. You're going to enjoy this episode. It's just like the other Rajarshi Nandi episodes. What I will tell you is that he was in Mumbai in order to collaborate on a project with myself and with my Level Supermind team. Level Supermind is an app that I've built over the last 3 years. It's a mind performance app with a lot of guided meditations built into it. We've got lots of spiritual leaders who've created content on the app, but it's the honor of my life that Rajarshi Nandi's work is now also present on my app. So if you want even more of him after this episode, make sure you check out Level Supermind. He's recorded multiple guided meditations related to multiple different deities that'll kind of help you begin or go deeper into your own journey towards the deities. But for now, all I'll say is that Rajarshi Nandi has finally returned on TRS. I'm genuinely so happy to see you sitting in front of me, sir.
Same here.
And everyone else is also very, very happy seeing you on TRS.
It's wonderful to be back. And Jai Bhairav Baba, Jai Ma Kamakhya, Jai Ma Tara.
Jai Bhairav Baba, Jai Ma Kamakhya, Jai Ma Tara. This is the first episode I'm doing without a Tara statue sitting here.
Yeah.
Because they say that the purpose of statues and devices and yantras at some point is to make its way into your heart and being. So as long as the yantra device or even the mantra lies within your body, you've achieved the purpose that it was built for. Is that a fair assessment? Or you think murtis and other yantras actually have power that should be kept in the middle of podcasts always?
No, so that depends. So it's muktis have their power. There is no denying it. But at the same time, what you said is also correct. Eventually, as sadhana progresses, the greatest upasak is eventually that individual, breaking down all technical language aside, whose body becomes the yantra, whose mind becomes the mantra. Whatever he speaks, whatever he acts, it is the deity acting. Ma Tara has to be eventually, she should sit here in the mind, and it is her force that should work through the vak, speech. Okay, and that speech then acquires a capacity that is self-actualizing, means jisko what is known technically as vak siddhi. Eventually, okay, she has three forms. One of the forms is Neela Saraswati. She creates knowledge, a very spontaneous kind of outpouring of knowledge that happens. That is beyond jnana. Jnana is like very high level of knowledge you have that comes to Saraswati. She is something that gives you something even beyond that. Okay, it's something bursts out from within your being, and that is perhaps, for lack of better words, what is enlightenment. It is an illumination that comes out through the Shakti of words and through anything that you focus on. It's a different realm.
What was the word you used? Some Vak Siddhi.
Vak Siddhi. Vak is speech. Siddhi means accomplishment in speech, which is basically another way of saying that such individual, whatever comes out of their mouth, knowingly or unknowingly, has some way, nature will use all her resources to ensure that that comes true.
Okay, like as in what you say, the words you use can become a manifested reality.
Yes, will become a manifested reality.
People like that exist in...
Everything exists. We may or may not be aware, we may not be able to meet such people, but everything is possible. Whatever is possible also exists.
Is reality an outcome of the wills of higher beings entirely? Or do we as simpler beings also contribute to reality?
I think everybody contributes at his level. Okay, so there is, this question comes in. If we rephrase this question, it is basically a question about whether there's destiny, whether there's free will. If things are effectively. So I had heard a parable long back. I don't remember who it was, some saint perhaps. So there's this young boy, who's standing, and he asks the same question to the saint. And the saint tells him, Acha, why don't you stand on one leg? So he decides to stand on his left leg. Okay, left leg is standing, right leg lifts up. Now he asks him, can you now stand on your left leg also? He said, no, then I'll fall. So he's saying what you did at that time created the karma. Now the reaction is here. Now it creates a constraint. If you lift the other leg also, you'll fall. That much is certain. So there is this constant feedback loop going on based on what you're doing right now, based on things you might have done, based on things that creates a moment.